All right, so there's quite a few topics we're going to talk about today, and the first one's going to be a pretty serious topic because really we haven't heard of swatting in a while, or it hasn't been made a big deal of for a little bit until now. Something recently happened where someone was actually killed in a swatting incident, and we all know what swatting is, right? Spoon, Noms, Nom, you want to give a
Yeah.
smaller explanation, real quick?
So basically, what happens when somebody swats somebody, they will usually it tends to be these little kids, or anyways, will get the information of somebody they are playing against in an online video game and basically call their local authorities and in an emergency reaction send like the police to their house. Usually the SWAT team. That's how it gets its name, swatting. Which usually ends up being a gigantic hassle for everyone involved, including the person who it gets called on. So it's a childish act, and it's ridiculous that people do this kind of thing, but it does happen, and as Shroom's about to tell you, sometimes can end up in a very, very, very bad situation.
Yeah. So um, this happened in Wichita. I'm guessing Wichita, Kansas. It's on the Wichita Eagle. I'll leave a link in the description to the news article that you guys can read it. But I'm gonna skip right down to the second part of the article. So, swatting led to a fatal shooting of Andrew Finch, police say, during a police briefing at City Hall on Friday afternoon. Deputy Deputy Police Chief Troy Livingston described the fatal shooting of Andrew Finch by a Wichita police officer. Officers went to the 1000 block of McCormick, preparing for a hostage situation, and they got into position, he said. A male came out the front door, Livingston said as he came out the front door. One of our officers discharged his weapon. Now, in short, the way as our article goes on to talk, on how this all went down, two kids were arguing in Call of Duty, apparently, and one of them wanted they were going to call the SWAT on each other. One of them was going to call the SWAT on the other, and the other person was going to get the SWAT called on him. He gave him a fake address. The address was actually a few houses down from his home, and that led to the SWAT team. They went to the wrong house, and ultimately the guy opened the door and he was shot and killed. And I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, a lot of people we've when swatting when it first started happening, we knew it was going to hurt somebody. There's times where a few times where YouTubers they were swatted and their family had guns held to their heads, but nothing had happened yet. No one has gotten killed like this recently. Um, and now the debate is kind of going whether these kids should be charged for it, what's going to happen. The officer he did get that leave of absence that officers get when they fire a weapon. It's a paid leave, so there's nothing on that. This just happened recently, earlier this, I think, 12 hours ago. Nam, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think at this point in time, it's just ridiculous. There's so many levels to this particular story, especially when you talk about who's to blame here. Obviously, there's tons of blame to go around, and that means absolutely nothing to the victim and his family, of course. I think even when it comes to looking at this from a gamer's perspective, um, obviously casting aside the tragedy that it is, I know it's kind of hard to transition from something like that to talking about video games, but this is just another thing that people will relate back to gaming, and it's terrible all around. Um, so you know, it's 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 one of those things that we can only really look at and look at the person who is doing it and going, this person needs to be punished for it, and we need to let it go at that. We don't need to draw any kind of correlation from what he was doing or where he was coming from. This is simply on the person at hand, and that is the person who called in the SWAT. I know there's other levels of blame that can go in here. You can talk about the person who gave the wrong address. That was stupid of that person. Or you can talk about the police officer that shot him and how maybe they were a little hasty in their reaction in that thing. And all of that stuff might be true. But I think really the focus needs to be going on to the person who is directly responsible for calling in the SWAT and I think the focus needs to be there. Aside from that, it's an extremely sad story. It's sad for the parties involved. You said this that we've heard these swatting stories before, and usually it just ends up being a headache for the person. It usually ends up being a headache for the victim, and there's almost never anything, permanently bad that comes out of this. But this time, it happened, and you can only say for so long it's going to be a matter of time before something does happen, and hopefully a lot of people will learn from this and they will see what can happen when you do this type of thing. Even though these people seem to lack this sort of foresight, I don't know how, but now there is concrete evidence of something happening, and hopefully, if anything, it prevents this kind of thing from going forward.
Yeah. Spoons?
I don't know. I can't really add too much other than what Nam had already said, but it's just sad the fact that someone has died as a result of these actions, as a result of someone getting frustrated at another player on the video games. And I kind of have to take it back and say, where were the parents in it? That's kind of one of those things I think parents need to pay attention and be involved into what their kids are doing, and teaching them that these things are wrong. Parents need to be aware of what swatting is and make sure their children aren't doing something stupid like this either.